Good evening. This is our May 19th, 2025 meeting of the Town Finance Community Housing Oversight Committee. Our chair, Kathy Dowd, is not present tonight. She's attending graduation from college, which probably takes priority over our meeting. And so I am sitting in as chair this evening. First order of business is to make an inquiry as to whether or not anyone is recording this device at this meeting. We're meeting hybrid, so if you're at home and you're recording, please let me know. Anyone present in the conference room here, please let me know. Sounds like no one has stated anything in the affirmative, so the only recording going on is this Zoom meeting. Because we are going hybrid, we'll start with a roll call, and all of our votes will be by roll call as well. So I'm just going to work around on the screen. So I'll start with John Connell.
Present.
Rick Simbo.
Present.
Rhonda Speck. Denise Grove.
Present.
And let's see, do we have, is that our, and I'm chair, acting chair, Peter Bingator, present. Do we have quorum?
Yes, there's.
And do we take ex officio members? Do we take attendance? No. Okay. All right. We have a quorum. And let's start with our agenda. First item on the agenda, public comment. Hearing none, we will move on to the second item on our agenda, and that is a vote, a review of the minutes of our last meeting of March 10th, 2025. Those minutes were distributed as part of your packet a week or so ago. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I move their acceptance.
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's have a vote. John Connell.
Aye.
Rick Simbo.
Aye.
Rhonda Speck.
I'm gonna abstain to vote in this.
You can still vote, but that's fine. Can we vote? We'll still have a quorum?
Yeah, it'll still be the majority of people here.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Denise Garland.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Staff liaison update.
Yes, thank
Any
you.
news from the staff? Any news having to do with this?
Any other news other than the
There is news. So as many, if not all of you know, I'll be taking the town manager role starting July 5th. And so it's part of, thank you. So as part of that transition, I'm figuring out how to reassign some duties to be able to make that transition. So one of them is, sadly, I am leaving the staff liaison role of this committee. Cecilia Simchak, our assistant director of finance, has agreed to take the committee on. She's obviously well equipped. You will be completely supported, and I think we're ready to make a smooth transition at 6:45 when I have to jump to another committee. That transition's official as of today, and she'll continue on. So thank you to Cecilia. And this committee's been going for 2 years, which I can't believe already, but I feel like we've come a long way.
So thank you, Katie, for serving as staff liaison, and obviously you were instrumental in forming the committee and coming up with the process for and setting our agenda. So thank you very much, and really the best of luck in the new position.
Thank you.
Excited to see you succeed in it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we're all hoping for that as well. Okay. And Cecilia, you've been staff on committees that I've been on before, and so I welcome you, and I'm sure it'll be great. And so thanks for stepping in.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Do we have an annual town meeting update? Does our staff provide that?
Yeah, I can give a quick overview, just to make sure everyone's aware that the 2025 annual town meeting appropriated or approved 2 additional appropriations of CPA fund for community housing projects. $2.8 million for the Charles River Center East Militia Heights construction, which that's now Charles River Heights, is the project name. And then $3.2 million for construction for NHA Seabeds Way Preservation Project. So we've updated kind of your foundational documents. TCHOC is now overseeing just under $3.4 million in town investments in community housing. There was in your packet the FAQs that went to town meeting on both of those projects, but I also just want to let you know that Anne Marie Bajwa, the head of the Charles River Center, is confirmed to come to your June 9th meeting to present on the project and kind of start their work with this committee. And NHA is always here, so they will get an update from them as well. So unless there's questions, that's the update.
All right. Does anyone on the committee have any questions of our staff update on town meeting? All right. All right. We have we've circulated a draft FY26 meeting schedule. Why don't we just start with that now? So, and then we can devote the remainder of our time together on reviewing the reimbursement costs.
Yeah, so it's the last page of the packet, starting in July and going through June of the following year, with the similar structure as we had this year, with monthly meetings scheduled if needed as hold, and then the quarterly meeting scheduled. So the first, I'll just go meeting by meeting, and then if there's any issues, we can reschedule. But the first monthly hold would be for July 14th.
This is already, we have one June 9th.
Yes, that's
So
confirmed.
this is after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any concerns with July 14th?
People may be missing Bastille Day celebrations, but other than that,
All right. The next monthly hold would be for August 11th.
I'm sorry, when is our meeting in June?
June 9th.
I won't be able to attend. I have a client meeting that night, but just so you know.
Okay. All right, if no issues for August 11th, and then the quarterly one, which is the confirmed, would be September 8th, which is the Monday after Labor Day. The next Monday, we have, okay, so it would have fallen on October 13th, which is Indigenous Peoples' Day, and then October 6th is Sukkot. And then October 14th would be a select board meeting, and then October 20th is town meeting. So we can either cancel this month or schedule a hold on the 14th without Kathy, if it's needed. What do people think?
I would propose to hold the 10 on 10/14 with the idea that we'll have that meeting only if reimbursements are requested and that there's some emergency around having the money flow. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm fine with that if everyone else. Okay, the next monthly meeting is tentatively scheduled for November 10th. That is the Monday before Veterans Day. So we can either hold that, or we could potentially move it to November 3rd or the 17th. I don't know if people take long weekends when there's a Tuesday holiday.
There aren't that many of them.
No.
Anyone have an opinion on that? I'm fine with it as is, but if people do take off that Monday before the 11th, or if anyone plans to.
Leave it as it is.
All right, let's leave it as is. Thank you.
And then the next quarterly one is December 8th. There are no conflicts, we'll keep that. The next two monthlies are confirmed. Based on the schedule that we had last year, the January 12th meeting would be to discuss T-Chalk's annual update letter, and then the February 9th would be to finalize the annual update letter. And that would be to get it to all the boards before CPC meets with select board and the finance committee on their consultations.
You're fine with me.
All right. And then that leads us to our next quarterly on March 9th. Okay, monthly.
If anybody knows they're busy already.
Yeah.
they're way ahead.
I would say the next monthly is April 13th. And then the next one would have fallen on May 11th. That is special town meeting, with May 4th being the annual town meeting. So we could push it to May 18th if we had any reimbursements.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
May 18th.
Yeah.
May 18th.
And then the final quarterly would be on June 8th. So with all of these, I'd say tentatively confirmed, assuming anyone else has, chimes in and says they absolutely can't make it. If I find out more, I'll reach back out in the next meeting. But for now, this is the schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are on to reimbursements. So you have in your packet, beginning at about page 11 or so, the series of requests, and now we were distributed today by email a summary of the disbursements under request. So I think they go a little bit out of order, because I have the first one on my packet is request 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so let's see, let's go with the summary list, that may be, does that make sense?
We can go with this list. So this is, all this does is start the Article 17 reimbursements and goes through all of those, and then goes through the Article 30, and the packet is just, the summary sheet is just reversed.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so then let's do this, then, that's fine, on the summary sheet, let's begin with the fourth line, which is disbursement request number 6. And that is the first disbursement request that comes up in your packet.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll start with that, and then we'll finish with the disbursement request under Article.
And just to provide a quick update, the summary sheet has the total appropriation, the disbursements to date, the number, the amount, if it's eligible or not eligible, and then the amount remaining if they were to either be approved, or if they're not eligible, it doesn't change the amount remaining. Obviously, if the board or the committee votes to not recommend any of these amounts will change. So I will then send a follow-up at the end of the meeting with all of the results of all of the approvals and not approvals. So that way you guys can have an updated form at the end.
So Cecilia, I had a question on that. If you just start with number 6, which I think is what we're starting with,
Yes.
the total appropriation is 1.3 million. And if I understand it correctly, we've dispersed 400,000, just use that as a round number from that, which takes it to a little bit under $1 million. And if we're taking out 14,000 more, shouldn't the amount remaining be like 887,000?
Yep. I did the math off the wrong column, so just ignore the amount remaining and I'll do a summary at the end.
All right, well, I just, yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, so I just want to make sure I was looking at it correctly. So that
You
last
are.
category, amount remaining, is incorrect.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the other thing I did, the second form that I handed out or emailed out shortly before, it's the form that I used to do on the front page of each of the covers. It's slightly different. I updated it for the purposes of this committee and these reimbursements as we've been seeing them. Previously, when I would receive reimbursements, they were one at a time. And so I could follow along with all of the, this is how much we've dispersed to date. This is how much has been remaining. When I'm getting 5 per article, it gets really messy to keep track if, the first one that we review isn't, recommended for disbursement, but the second one is, then all of the numbers on the remaining forms are incorrect. So I'm just doing the summary afterwards. So again, I think it'll be a lot cleaner for me to kind of send the recap of what is happening.
Cecilia?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Rick. Just if you don't mind refreshing my memory, and perhaps others have the same question, with respect to the process that you go through to determine whether something is eligible or not eligible. And the second half of that question would be not this particular number, disbursement number 6, but on some of the next ones, the numbers are getting up there pretty high. And how do we go about, I mean, how much effort do you have to expend to go through all these details to say, okay, that's good, that isn't good, that type of thing? How does that work?
Yeah, so what I'm looking for when I receive the request is I'm looking at, first I confirm that there's proof of payment so that the housing authority has paid the invoice. So that's the first one that I look for. And then I look at what the invoice is for, who it's for, what the amount is. I confirm that the math looks right. So I'll double check that all the totals are lining up. I have a running spreadsheet of all the invoices that have been submitted from the housing authority so far. And so I'm making sure that it's not, you know, an accidental duplicate invoice, that we haven't already reimbursed them for it. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking to see what the invoice is saying it's for, and if that lines up with the, not only the project, but the CPC eligible parts of the project. And if I'm not sure, and even if I feel pretty confident, I'm running them all by town council just to get his feeling on if it meets the definition of CPC eligible or not before I'm bringing it to the board meeting. But I am bringing every reimbursement moving forward that I receive. So before, if I was receiving something that didn't feel eligible, I wasn't presenting it to TCHOC, and now I am bringing it forth so you can see just kind of everything that's going on. And then I'm looking at, as we go on, the board reports that I have. So in some of the later ones, you'll see we have all of the committee reports from the housing authority to their board. And I looked through the status report that corresponded with the month. And if it looked like it was related to what was in the invoice, I threw that in as an attachment as well for TCHOC's review.
So this requires a great deal of time on your part to
Yes.
put this together. Okay, and so if you get a request for, say, I think there was one for like $70-something thousand, and what's the basis? I mean, do you look at that, or do we have someone at the housing authority that comes forward and says, yeah, that's correct, or that dollar value or the charge is correct, that type of thing? That, you know, that somebody's hourly rate is appropriate?
I am, I guess, making the assumption that the housing authority, if they have paid the bill, that they agree with the invoice and the charges that are put forth. But I'm not making that determination. If something looks like, why would they charge you this much hourly? I'm not looking at that necessarily.
Okay, and Reg, is that Cheryl's job to do?
Should we come up to the table, because you can't hear from back here?
Yeah, if you have a question, okay, Reg, we'll do that, sure. Why don't
I'm
you
sorry,
come
he
up?
was on the screen.
No,
so
those are good, no, Rick, those are good questions, and so we're kind of workshopping this, and so I think those are good questions, so let's hear from Reg Foster is the chair of the Housing Authority, and Cheryl Bassman, who's the executive director of the Housing Authority. Why don't you come forward, and you can field those questions.
So both Cheryl and I go through all bills in detail.
You each go through that.
Yes, and then we meet at great length, like Cecilia, to reconcile everything between the 3 or 4 government agencies that are involved in actually creating and generating and these bills, and then reimbursing them. And then we tie it all the way out to the actual checks. that, you know, reimbursements received. So there's a whole end-to-end audit trail that we go through.
So Rick had kind of a question about the assessing the reasonableness of a bill. How is it that you approach that question?
You look at every line item, you compare it to the contract that you've signed, you look at the work products that have been delivered, and you ensure that the housing authority in this case is receiving what they bargained for under the contract.
Okay, I'm looking at it, and this is kind of a, trying to look at the parallel path when the building committee, John's former committee, the one that George Kent's involved in, and Richard Cream, they go through a process where they have personnel that review everything and then come to the committee looking for recommendations. I just wanted to make sure that from a procedural perspective, not only for the housing authority, but down the road when East Militia Heights gets involved, similar type approval process would be the same for this project as well as any project that the town might be involved in. And that's really, you know, where I'm going from. Is this consistent? I defer really to John Conley or to George Kent or someone else from that committee or past that would know a little bit more about it than I do.
Yeah, Rick, so long as someone on the staff level has reviewed the invoice that came in and researched it and then makes a recommendation to the committee as to it's appropriate to pay or not to pay, we can question that recommendation, but someone at the staff needs to do the review so they can make that recommendation.
Okay.
And so, John, when you say staff, you're referring to the town staff as opposed to the
So,
house.
so for example, on the PBBC, it would be Hank Half, who's the town employee who would review the invoice and then make the recommendation to the committee.
Okay.
So whatever level here is, whether it's done at, you know, at the housing authority level or East Militia Heights level, but someone at those levels, I would expect would need to do that and then make the recommendation to us.
Okay. Rick, you satisfied with that?
Yeah, I am. I just wanted to make sure that from a procedural perspective, we're just consistent. So that down the road, if we run into a problem with any of the projects, you know, it's always, we're paying off once the invoices are have been spent. And so, you know, we're kind of checking after the fact. I mean, the same thing would hold true when we did the church projects as well from the CPC. There was, you know, a staff member, and I think it was Cecilia or someone who did the an analysis when the bills came in for the church project. And then we knew how much was available and whether they were, you know, we left it up to the proponent, I guess, to put forth the accurate numbers and stayed within the budget. So that's really where I was going with this.
Yeah, I recall in one of our early meetings, George Kent raised the question that he wanted to get some sense of as we make these payments, the progress on the project itself, right? So because I think his expressed concern was, well, if we have this, you know, we have $1.5 million of pre-development funds and there was ARPA funds as well. Where is it that the housing authority is at in terms of progressing through pre-development costs, right? I think that George raised that as a question, and I think that there was some discussion, and my recollection was that there was some sort of agreement that the housing authority would provide that kind of progress. Maybe we can.
It could be as simple as, I mean, I guess, it kind of goes into what I was sort of wondering. It's like, I think at this point, we kind of approve things in a bit of a vacuum, like we're just sort of approving disbursements, but we don't know the total budget and how the project is going and what percent is complete. And where, like, so are we 100% through and you're 50% through the pre-development? It's a simple, I have to assume somebody's holding the whole budget and has a calculation of what's been expended and what percentage completion you are with, or how far you are in terms of the budget. And basically, is it our responsibility, I would think, to make sure that you don't run out of money, or that the money is being paid at a certain point and not another point? And I'm not sure. I've never kind of completely understood that. I don't think it's asking you to do any work that you don't already do, but we don't see we don't see the whole budget, the whole pre-development budget and the whole, everything that's getting paid out. This is just one piece of it. Is that?
Is that a question?
No, I assume you have
I
it.
mean, we
You've
did
got the whole-
present at the March meeting.
Oh, so I missed it. I apologize.
And everybody seemed to be pretty satisfied with the presentation, where we presented a major update on where we are.
Great.
And the one line answer to your question is we made the deadline to submit to HLC in the winter 2025 funding round against all odds. And we're now waiting to see what they say
Great.
for a
I
$57 million
apologize. It sounds like I
project.
missed the big update, so I apologize.
But, we should give regular status reports, and you just need to give us a little bit of a heads up.
No, that's making me funny around with amazing. Congratulations.
All right, so why don't we try and workshop that and come up with some sort of proposal for what the housing authority should be providing us in connection with the reimbursements? Because we are now, we've got 1.5 million in pre-development grant that they're now drawing down. You've got drawing down about 500,000 of it. There's roughly $800,000 or $900,000 left. So we're going to get a lot of reimbursement. We have another $1 million of reimbursement requests coming in. So this could be an opportunity for us to kind of.
May I add one more point that you and two would want to say if you knew to say it? I haven't said this yet, but we've actually drawn down all the ARPA funds. So the reason that it hasn't been there before is we haven't been submitting reimbursement requests. And so starting now and getting more intense, obviously your questions are timely and appropriate, or suggestions. Yeah.
Great.
So just taking that Linden Chambers, the 1.3 million, is there a breakdown of what, that's projected to be spent on? Like X amount is for Eagle, X amount is for environmental, X amount is for architect. And then do we have a break? Can we get a breakdown of how that 1.3 is scheduled to be spent? And then as we get in these items, we can see where these items stand versus that schedule of how that money's supposed to be spent.
So the answer is absolutely yes. You just have to form the question and give it to me later this week.
Okay, I just did.
The June meeting is coming up, and we can be put on the agenda, bring our development partner. Remember, we've turned over the management of the project to them. So I'm not saying that Cheryl and I have nothing to do right now, but they are going to be in the lead from this point forward and maintaining that level of management detail.
Great.
So if we could, by the end of this week, have a concrete list of topics you would like to address at the next TCHOC meeting, that would be great.
So I'm looking for like a living document that will get each meeting saying, you start with, this is the budget for 1.3 million. These are the categories of which we're projecting is going to be spent. And how do we stand against each of those categories as we move forward each month?
Whatever the consensus of the committee, if you could put it in writing and give it to us, that would be great.
Okay. So do we have let me turn to, there are some people who've got subject matter expertise in this area. I know that Rhonda does, and then and I can hear from Denise, but Rhonda, would you like to add to that? This kind of makes sense to me, but I'd like to hear from the committee.
I think it's probably stuff that is being done, and we just need to ask for the right documents and they'll provide it. But yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I think we just want to be able to say and represent that it's all getting spent, and that you're keeping, that the expenditures are equal to the level of completion, which I'm sure it is, but especially given what you've gotten done in the last couple of months. But I also want to go back and look at what the notes from March, so that I can see what was already discussed.
Okay, so that, and Denise, just
Yes, so just for clarity's sake, and probably Celia, I want to ask you this question. It's my understanding that CPA money, of course, is not the only money involved in this project, right? So you're looking only specifically at the CPA money. Is it consistent with the article that was voted on in town meeting?
Yes.
There may well be other resources that NHA is using to complete the same portion of the project.
Yeah.
Right, okay, and that's going to be difficult for you to quantify because that's not the lane you're in.
Yeah, and this is what I provided in the packet is this, that I'm working off the same information. So,
But, well, just with respect to pre-development, you've drawn down on the ARPA funds, you're drawing down on the CPC funds. And is there another source of funding for
Well,
pre-development costs?
right now, we're pretty much fully funded, absent something coming up that we
Okay.
don't know about here.
All right, so then we can see, we can actually, I think if, John, do you mind taking on the task of coming up with, that, as you described it just tonight, and putting that together as the questions and the model that we'd like to see on, at least with respect to the drawdown on article, on the pre-development article, which would be Article 17.
Yes,
Is that okay?
Peter?
of course.
Peter, can I just chime in one more time?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from not just the pre-development numbers, but you've got a number of different projects earmarked for certain expenditures, either an article number previously or the most recent article. We also have the East Militia Heights project is now going to be coming along with the same type of renew and scrutiny. And I think all I'm trying to suggest is that I would think we would have to set up some type of, just as Rhonda said, what's the expenditure, what's the percent completed? And we want to be able to rely on someone to be able to give us that information and allow us to make a judgment that, the $3 million that we've allocated for this portion of a project is on schedule or way behind, or something's falling through the crack and we're not identifying it early enough. And we're going to be stuck with a position that all of a sudden, one of the projects or a portion of the project is going to run out of money. And we need to be, I think, ahead of that as far as knowledge of that when it comes time, even for our annual report to town meeting, when we have to go through this. And, that's why I originally, it's more than just the one project. I don't mean to pick on the Housing Authority and Reg, but they were the ones that were easily identifiable in the table. But it's going to be for a number of different expenditures, different projects. Percent completions are going to be different from point A to point B. And I believe that, Rhonda brings up a good point. Somebody brought that up before. Maybe it was George Kent, but someone brought it up before. And I'm not so sure that I was comfortable with it. And so I just bring it up one last time. That's all.
Okay. Well, let's start with the questions that we've kind of formulated tonight through you and through John. And how would we want to circulate those? I think they should forward those questions to staff and then.
Yeah,
How
they
do
can
you want
forward them through me, and then I can kind of compile them and mail them or email them out to everyone to see if there's
I don't
anything.
think it's questions. I think it's just a matter of information.
It's a way of
Information that's-
organizing the information.
Yeah, yeah, and if
Okay.
you guys want to, if everyone wants to email me what they're looking for, I can compile that into some sort of checklist document, something that will kind of track it to give the Housing Authority the guidance and then to give just some sort of organization to what we're looking at every time. And then I can send that out.
I'm
So
gonna lean-
Cecilia, a good place to start is if you look at the PBBC, Hank has a template for each project that the PPBC is overseeing, which, starts with the entire project amount, the categories in which it's being spent, and how much we've spent on each of those categories, whether it's, I'm just using for the example of that one, hard costs, soft costs, other contingency, that type of thing. So I would think we would want it for the project, the entire project, whether it's a $50 million project or whatever. And then we want it for our specific articles. So if CBES is just using an example, if Linden is a $70 million project, there should be a sheet that shows how that 70 million is being allocated, and then a separate sheet on how our $1.8 million is being allocated. And
Okay, I can
Hank
ask
has
him.
that template that the PBC's been using for a long period of time.
And if I could just,
Okay.
what would be a helpful thing to me is before we start to generate information or that kind of thing, right? Now that you have a sense of what the committee is looking for and places that we can look for that information that John is speaking about, I'd appreciate a recommendation from you, Celia, first, and then we could look at it and we could say, you could say, this is how I know that many conversations go on between you and the Needham Housing Authority. I expect those kind of discussions to be going on with the Child Service Center. Like, if you could look back on that, reflect on that, what is that all about? What was the extra phone call about? What was the longer discussion about? If you could give us a template working off what John was talking about, and then let us look at it and say, oh yeah, we think that's gonna meet our need, oh, wait a minute, it still doesn't meet it. I think that would be a better use of everybody's time.
Yeah, no, I think that I can do that, definitely, especially if I know what the committee is looking for, that helps guide my questions.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Every real estate project has a very similar total development cost structure. And I think if you just use that as the basis of and then have different, different categories for what's been spent and where you are on that line item, it'll be enough information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one
Yes.
more thing I'd throw in there while we're at it is, we're not in a great rush in the sense that there would be several years before we even get phase 1A in Linden Street done, So it'd be great to take some time to iterate and get it right so the committee is satisfied with it. And in that vein, I would ask that the charter for this initial exercise also encompass Seabed's Way, which we just, thank you, town meeting, received another 3.2 million for. And so that's going to closing, by the end of the year, knock on wood. It doesn't need tax credits, and and it's a different project. It's not it's a gut renovation project is what it is. It's not a tear down and redevelop kind of project. So to the extent there are differences in what a TCHOC is going to be interested in reviewing and to do its mission, that there might be some differences in what you're looking for, is all I'm trying to say. So if you could have that as part of the scope in this initial exercise, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's fine. That's you want to bring that project forward and make sure that we have the right kind of analysis going in. That's
It's
fine.
going forward as of
Right.
a couple weeks ago.
Right. And I think all of this is very timely because now we're getting into there's some serious expenditures that are happening for two different, non-town organizations. So it's good to get all these questions and concerns on the table now.
And this is actually a growth exercise for this committee, right? As we begin to take on more than one project, we begin to understand the expanse of it. I think this is a very good process for the committee.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Rick, thanks for bringing that up and getting us focused on it.
So
So
my
now-
apologies for sidetracking the meeting.
No, you did not. That was very helpful. And so I think, all right, everyone feel comfortable closing out this part of the discussion, and then we can move on to reimbursements, and thank you for everybody's input. Anyone else have anything else to say? Okay, good. So now let's start with disbursement request number 6. which is on summary sheet, I think it's the fourth one down, and it's the
Yes.
first one that's drawing from Article 17. So City, I think that you determined that's not eligible.
Yeah, I spoke with town council and we determined this does not meet eligibility requirements.
Okay, and that was real, I think that was related to the Burke
Yeah,
lawsuit.
we
Yeah.
disagree,
Okay.
but
Well-
would you please say why it's not eligible?
It's not creating new housing or dealing with affordable housing. It's dealing with a lawsuit that's between something else. And Chris did not feel that that was in the spirit of the article.
Well, it's not a matter of spirit, it's a question of whether it is eligible or not eligible.
And he determined that it was not.
And do you have that in writing?
I had a conversation. I don't know if I have it in writing, but I can follow up with him in
I mean,
writing.
yeah, and I'm not trying to be disputatious, but we also reviewed it and it is not common, if not common, for parties to file lawsuits during the pre-development period opposing the creation and preservation of affordable housing. And I've been advised that it absolutely is an eligible expense. And not only that, we're defending the town of Needham. The co-defendant in this is the planning board. And so, and that town council was involved and we cooperated together. And we've actually taken on the burden of defending not only the Needham Housing Authority, but also the planning board. It was filed in opposition, to the planning board's, let's see, it was November 6th, 2024, approval of the special permit. And, we all think it's completely without merit and frivolous lawsuit. And we collaborated together to submit the response, and we're now waiting for the Superior Court to schedule it. And there's a little thing called the Karen Reed trial taking place right now.
All right, but
So everything's not happening.
Reg, you know what? We're not going to differ with town council's advice, right? So we're not going to adjudicate that.
We don't have town council's
Right,
advice.
well, we do have town council's advice, so if that's an issue, that's gonna be put on the table for now.
So I don't have town council's advice.
Well,
I don't actually know what the Burke lawsuits are. So I would really appreciate putting this on hold, getting more information, and if town council needs to come and speak to us, I'd be very interested in that.
And also, I mean, if you have counsel that has given you advice that it should be eligible, they might be worth a conversation. with.
Well, I would love to have a conversation, but I only found out it was not eligible 4 hours ago.
okay, all right.
So
And I don't, it's not even in writing. So it's, I think maybe your point is that if there is such a determination, there should be a conversation at the staff level prior to it being presented with a fait accompli one way or the other to the teacher for consideration, right?
My point was, so we're not gonna adjudicate that tonight.
I'm not making that point.
Okay.
I'm just making the point that we disagree.
Right.
And I was asking for the basis, and there is no basis for it being presented. Or it hasn't been written down yet or something, so it's a part of the process thing that we're talking about, which is, I think it's worth taking a minute on this process. We just spent the last half an hour on process.
So I would like to make a motion that the committee will not take a position on this as of tonight, and we'll gather more information and either, let me say gather more information in a way that satisfies.
We can just put the request on the table. Do you want to do that?
You
but if we
put
can do
something
that.
on the table, you make it go away.
Okay, that's awesome. That's fine. Your motion, what is your motion?
That the committee does not consider Article 6 at the meeting tonight of May 9th.
It's a disbursement number 6.
Disbursement summary 6, I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay, do we have a second? I'll second the motion. Well,
I'm
let's,
trying to understand what exactly we're doing.
I-
I'm not disagreeing
We're
with
just
it.
saying, we're not taking this,
Yeah,
we're
we're
not
not-
putting the
but I-
committee's approval
but I-
or disapproval
Okay,
on
but
this recommendation.
Okay, can we have some discussion?
yeah, we're open. Now it's available for discussion.
So so it sounds like a few hours ago, this was determined to be, you were told this was ineligible.
2 hours ago.
Okay, I have two questions. One is, if something's ineligible, what's your other source of funding? Do you have another source of funding? I mean, are we is this, it has to be eligible or it doesn't get paid?
The bills have to be paid somewhere, but we have been trying to use up, the ARPA funds, where we could have submitted it to, but we didn't.
Because you use them up.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess, it looks like there's 3 things on here that are, have been deemed ineligible. Right, here's 2 more down the bottom. And you just found out, I think what should happen is that it should not, we shouldn't have been bringing something up that they found out were ineligible 2 hours ago.
That's Rhonda, for the record, we only found out 2 hours.
No, I get it, this is not meant to be criticized, criticism, I think we
No.
just need to work on the process.
Yeah, and
So
just to give the committee a little bit of my thought process, so we can discuss it and we can change it, absolutely, is none of these are all my eligible, ineligible. Ultimately, if T-Chalk pushed back and did say, no, we want you to look into more, it wouldn't be a final decision. So I didn't want to necessarily say, this is ineligible, this has been approved without T-Chalk taking the formal vote. So that is why I didn't pass along the information, but I can definitely do that moving forward. And if council decides or deems that something is ineligible, if that's his recommendation, I will get that in writing next time and definitely pass that on to the committee, pass that on to the housing authority in advance. That's not a problem.
Okay, and I think it seems reasonable also if in town council deems it ineligible, that you should be willing, they should be willing to talk to the housing authorities council to, just have a conversation so that everybody, there's an agreement.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
I will make one request is if there's this much back and forth, the earlier that I can get these in advance of the meeting, the more time this allows for me to actually do this back and forth and get the committee the documentation in time for them to review prior to Monday night's meeting.
Right.
Well,
And
let's-
one of the reasons why this is good is, for example, this is a $15,000 legal bill, and when we're paying it, we'll want to know, is this 15,000 going to be the last one? Is this 15,000 that's going to be 15,000 every month? Are we projecting an overall legal spend of 150,000 or a legal spend of 20,000? So it needs to be put in context. You just can't pay a bill in isolation without knowing, where it stands as far as what the total obligation would be on this lawsuit. So I think that's why it's important that we, have that discussion and review and presentation of information to us through town council and others, so we know exactly where that stands. So we're not doing it. I think Rhonda had the good term about not doing it like in a vacuum, but viewing this expense in what are the projected legal expenses for this matter.
And because we're talking about process and we're entering a phase, clearly things more complicated. My understanding is that you have requested the invoices from the Needham Housing Authority no later than 2 weeks prior to a meeting like this. Can we also set a deadline that the committee members have to receive information in a reasonable amount of time, that we can also assess the information?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think that would be?
We can just have a requirement that the agenda and all the materials need to be ready at least 2 business days before the meeting. That's when the packet would be available. So.
And I guess my question for the committee would be, if I have unanswered questions, would you like me to pass those along or hold those on for the next meeting?
Well,
I think we'd want you to hold
Okay.
on to them until we all have all the information we need.
Okay. Because
the other thing-
just to be clear that a lot of this would not have come in, and that is why it's coming in late. So knowing that you'd rather me wait if I don't have answers is incredibly helpful. So thank you.
But obviously
So-
they still want to get paid in a timely manner too, so we have to balance that.
Right.
I
All right,
think
so-
just,
Go
if I
ahead.
could just weigh in on this a little bit. This particular request is for legal fees. The other 2 that were rejected, what were those for?
Sorry, I want to look at the actual form before I respond. One, they were both for legal fees. But they were looked at as ineligible because one were the legal fees surrounding the formation of a 501c3, and then legal fees surrounding an open meeting law question.
But if they're all in service of the housing, I'm questioning why they're ineligible as well, so.
Yeah, no, I
you
can
know,
have Chris
Yeah. I
write
mean,
up something.
these things do come up. I mean, this is what happens when you're building housing, so. When, I don't know the letter of the paragraph and what the requirements are, but you would think that they would be eligible items.
Yeah,
given
but
the-
who's, Rhonda, my question is, who's responsible for overseeing these issues? Is this just the housing authority? Or is there any responsibility of the town to do this? Or was this, something that the housing authority was fighting a lawsuit for these three particular disbursements? And, are we, I guess my question is, in the process, as we go through these, are we going to become the juror to decide whether these are legitimate expenses? If town council is advising something, what happens if, town council doesn't agree at the end of this point? Who's going to be the juror? Who's going to decide whether this gets paid or doesn't get paid? Is this our responsibility?
The town council over, has jurisdiction over whether or not something is legitimate for the CPA, not us. So,
I think
Can
overall,
I-
it seems like we need more information.
A, we
Right.
need more information. B, we need to be more clear in our language. We're not talking about legitimate expenses or illegitimate expenses. We're talking about eligible expenses or non-eligible expenses. And we want to be very careful about that language.
yeah,
And I think when we talk about more information, as the chair is speaking about, and as Rhonda has spoken about, that when we realize that there may be a discrepancy, not only do we want to hear what the Needham Housing Authority or the Charles River Center of legal authorities have said, we'd want to hear that argument. We'd also want to have not just simply a letter from town council, but something like this, I would certainly want to have a discussion for the committee with town council so that we all move forward together. So I would make those recommendations, but I really defer the chair clearly saying we need more information. And I just personally want to make clear that I think much of what we're discussing tonight, and I thank you, Rick, for bringing it up, is actually about the growth of T-Chalk ourselves, what our processes are, what our timelines are, what kind of information. I deeply appreciate how hard Celia is working, how she's beginning to process the information on multiple projects now and multiple streams of revenue, right? What the Needham Housing Authority is doing and trying to accomplish, and what the Charles River Center can learn from us, and we can improve our processes. And I think we're really talking about our responsibility tonight, and I really appreciate this. I feel a real growth in the committee here.
To piggyback off of process, because I do have a question that comes up on the later two that have what town council thought were ineligible items. The ineligible refers to some of the line items on the invoice, but not necessarily all of the line items on the invoice. And so how we want to handle invoices that come in front of us like that, because I imagine as the projects go on, the invoices are not going to get simpler. And so if that comes up, how the committee would like to look at those and what questions they would like me to ask.
Are you raising that for a question now, as a discussion point now?
Yeah, or just to think about.
Yeah. All right, so let's just deal with the immediate, which is we have 3 requests that our town council suggested are not eligible under the scope of the grant. Okay, not that there's anything wrong with the expenditure. So I guess what I would propose is that we put those aside. I know that actually is burdening the housing authority a bit because they've already paid the bill. And then looks like Denise has suggested that council actually come to our next meeting. So your suggestion is?
That we receive information from legal counsel, from
May I-
housing authority, we hear from town council.
Okay, so why
May I
don't we
make
start
a
with that?
Suggestion on that?
Sure.
I think the goal is to have everything resolved ahead of time and any differences. And town council or our council or, that is not required at the point. And, unless it's sort of a last resort. I mean, to have them come for a $2,000 invoice
Right.
it is a way, will cost more than $2,000 in legal fees. I'm just,
Okay.
just saying.
So let's try, so we should, this is a good place where these reimbursement requests, we should have a discussion between council. That's what, right? That's kind of the simplest approach, right?
I agree.
Okay.
And I think, if I may add one sentence to that, I mean, I came prepared to say why they were eligible, but the committee does not have the information and that process not taking place. And that we're arguing over $2,000 invoices is probably a good thing to kind of work out the kinks in the process, in my opinion. And there's no point, spending more committee time
Yeah.
tonight.
No, I think you're right. Let's move on and hopefully approve everything else, but, good it came up on small items, because when it gets bigger, it'll be harder.
Okay, now we are on, we're on disbursement request 7.
All right,
Okay, I said my order is different.
this one is for $76,102.06. It is not legal fees. It is for phase 1 pre-construction soil characterization for offsite disposal related to the Linden Street redevelopment project.
Okay, so and in your packet, you'll see backup for that, and it's invoices from HRP.
Yeah, I did not have any report out to the committee to attach to this. The reports I have only go through the end of 2024, and this was the start of this calendar year, so.
And there's also evidence that the housing authority is paid HRP.
Yes.
Okay. So let's say, any discussion concerning disbursement request number 7.
I move to pay.
Well, this, Peter, from my perspective, this is kind of gets back to the question that John raised about, okay, you've expended 76,000 on soil testing and labor associated with it, and environmental stuff associated with the site. I guess the question is, of that $76,000, what was the original budget called for? I mean, is that 100% using the
Those are the questions. we're
only
gonna also-
invoice for that, or is it something less than that? That's where I think John and Rhonda pointed that up. We don't know.
Right, but
Correct.
tonight we're gonna need we have to approve these in a bit of a vacuum, but in the future we won't.
Well, that's a decision for the committee.
That's the
Do
decision for
we-
the committee, but that's the request.
The proposal, I guess, is we're gonna end up approving these in a bit of a vacuum, or we can put it aside. That's up to the committee, and the comfort level that the committee has.
So I would make the case, we can't put all of this off, right?
Mhm.
Maybe these are paid invoices but I would make the case that tonight we are making decisions based on our previous process, but we are improving our processes going forward.
I second that.
Okay, any discussion on that? Let's
I
just-
missed what you said, Denise. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Rick, I said, given our discussion tonight,
all right,
we don't want to delay all of these approvals for things that we certainly have information on that are eligible, and there has been no question. We will approve them tonight based on our previous process, but our whole learning tonight is that going forward, we're going to have a new and improved process.
And I understand that. My only point would be is that the two principals, Cheryl and Reg, would have some semblance of whether 76,000 is
Are you talking about?
100%, zero? You know, what percentage of the project is that environmental cost cover? And you don't have to get the dollar value, but just give us a sense that, you know, 76,000 just, we didn't approve something that overran the budget by 200%. And, you know, somewhere Cheryl and Reg might have some data that would support that, but maybe I'm wrong.
So the question is, do you have, as you sit here now, do you have some, let's say you have some comfort level that is within a budgeted amount? Are we done with soil testing? Do we know that? Is this the last of the bills of the soil testing?
So, yes, my understanding is within budget. The over budget for pre-development is in excess of $3 million, relatively speaking, if I understand Rick's question correctly. And I think the real question is that's actually starting to really be scary, maybe, is what is the role of the T-chart? Because if you're trying to duplicate what the PPBC does, then that's, you know, I can't, neither Cheryl can go down that path without bringing a lot more firepower and stepping aside. And that goes back to defining what the role and what kind of information T-Chalk needs here. The answer is yes, you know, to my knowledge, that's been done, but I'm not running the project. You know, right now it's Peabody AHSC, and you need their project managers and people, or, you know, here, or maybe from the architect firm. So I'm getting a bit,
You won't need that.
well,
If we have a total development cost budget and there's a budget line item for soil testing that's $85,000 and you bring us a bill for 76, we know you're good.
but you're looking for that level of granularity.
Well,
Because
that's-
you know, there's
that's not
like
very-
hundreds of items that go into the $3 million.
It's
And,
not usually that granular.
well,
Anyway.
I know it isn't that granular, but this is a 70,000 out of 3 million is a small, very small grain of sand in the overall cost.
But there's not, but what the concern is that there's really no way for us to assess. But there's no way for us to assess now what we have in front of us is an invoice and a check. And we believe that you paid this invoice, but that doesn't give us much information.
Pursuant to a process, but it isn't the PPC process. You know, we wouldn't have paid it, obviously, if it wasn't a legitimate expenditure that we did. In fact, you know, there's terabytes of information that we could make available to the T-Chalk that, you know, that is the actual soil testing.
We're not asking for that.
I
Yeah,
don't
but
know what
Reg,
you're
nobody's asking
I'm
for
very
that.
confused.
When I pay invoices on a project, I have a budget, and every time I pay an invoice, I take that budget, I take that amount that I paid off my budget.
Yeah.
And I have a line item and I have a balance left
Got it.
for it's very easy.
I'm just
It's
looking
not-
for what you
that's
folks
all-
want to
That's
do.
all we're doing. We just wanna say, if there's a line item and it says $100,000 for things that include this as an item, and then we all know that there's a budget and otherwise we're just Rick's not wrong. We're just saying $76,000, great. Is that half of what you're gonna spend? Is that all of what you're gonna spend? Is that, you know, $30,000 over what you thought you were gonna spend? It's not hard. It's really easy.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I
not saying
promise
it's
you,
hard. I
promise you
just.
Peabody's already
what-
doing it.
I think you need to define in advance what you're looking for, so we don't,
Yes.
we can hit the mark
Right,
every
we
time we show up here.
We will. It's easy.
So
I think we're.
I understand both parts of this, but I think it's what we're asking Celia to do for us, right? We're asking her to tell us what we're spending, what's left, and have a sense of how things move forward, right?
Yeah, and I will put something together after working with Hank on what he puts together for the PBBC. And Reg, I'll forward that along to you and Cheryl to kind of format it in a way that works for the housing authority, because obviously it's not gonna be an apples to apples thing, it's not gonna be the exact same. And then come for the next meeting with that kind of template provided, so that the reimbursements moving forward will have that information along with it.
And that's what we as a committee, when you're saying, what's our role? And it is very different than the PPPC, and that's not the road that we're trying to travel on. But we have stewardship and fiduciary responsibility for this CPA money, right, that the town is involved in. So we need to know where we are and where we're going, right? We don't need to know what the soil testing results were. We don't need to know if, you know, what that means as far as mitigation of the land or anything like that. We just need to know, are we on track? Do we have money moving forward? Have we expended all of our funds?
And I think we agreed tonight
Point
that we're
them
not
over
gonna
there.
know that information, so
Right.
let's keep going, because
Are-
I just think this, if you don't mind, I just want to dwell on this another minute, okay? I don't think that we're asking, for example, what New England Testing Laboratory did for $16,363. That's not our role. That's not the granular line item that we're looking for. All we're looking for is bring it up a level and say, okay, you know, we've expended $76,000 of $80,000 worth of a budget. And that's 95% of what we're committed to go forward. If you get that information, it doesn't mean that you have to write down every line item and determine what New England Testing Labs did or how many hours this particular person. That's not what we're here to do. We're here just to get total numbers down. And that was my only comment on this. That's all.
Okay, I think we're in agreement on that. And so I think that, so for tonight, the question is, do we want to approve this tonight? And so I'm gonna make a motion to approve
I
this
second it.
expenditure. We have a second, further discussion. Discussion includes whether or not we want to table it.
So just a question with respect to that. I understand the bill's been paid. So obviously it came from it came from somewhere. There's a budget or there was available funds to pay it. If this, for example, was to go on for another month, does that mean that that original source of the funds is depleted so that another payment can't be made someplace else? In other words, just trying to understand what the effect of tabling it for a month to have this process be put in place. Is it preventing something else from being paid?
So that's a question for the housing authority. So Reg, can you respond to that?
Yeah, it's a bill for, through January 31st, and it's overdue, we paid it. Coming up with cash flow to pay bills in advance and not have prompt reimbursement from the town is a really big problem for us. We don't have a lot of, we have, it's not like we don't have a million, average 800,000 to $1.5 million in the bank, but most of that cash is tagged and earmarked for specific housing programs. So it's a huge problem if all of a sudden we're not, with no, if you told us a month ago what you were looking for, we'd certainly provide it, but it's a huge problem if you don't approve it tonight.
Okay, so you're saying it's a huge problem if it's not approved tonight. That's not, we're not saying that all of this, you're gonna always get pushed back 60 or 90 days, but we're just saying for tonight.
Yeah, but we do need to improve the process. I mean, it's not where we want to satisfy the committee here.
Okay.
But this has been paid though, right? Just to clarify.
But they have limited resources to pay more bills. So we need to, I think it's a.
Well, it's been spent, it's
It
been
would be a
committed,
hell of a
and it's been spent. And there's $76,000. There's a check here from Citizens Bank saying that this money has been paid to the vendor. Okay? And all you're looking for at this point is just reimbursement from the town? Or what is it?
May I answer that question?
Yeah, sure. Reg will answer that question.
So it's, yes, it's been paid, but we have a whole bunch of other bills we haven't paid because we haven't got the cash in to pay them in advance, so we can submit them to next month. So it's a snowballing problem if you're not prompt paying. We don't prompt pay vendors, then we get into trouble, and we don't get promptly reimbursed, then the whole thing falls apart.
And I will attest to that. If you don't pay vendors, they find somebody else to work for. They put you at the back of the line.
But we
Understood.
can't submit, we haven't submitted everything that's in the queue because we don't have the cash to pay it because we haven't got this reimbursement yet. We're gonna turn the $76,000, it's working capital problem that is limited,
Oh, so
that we can
you're
use for
saying
this.
even when you get reimbursed for this, you're gonna be paying bills that are outstanding right now.
That we haven't
on your
submitted yet,
desk.
yeah, because we have
Okay,
to
so that-
reimburse them in advance.
That answers the question pretty fully that John raised, okay?
That's fine.
Okay, so I think that, all right, so, any other questions regarding this?
Just one more. What's the difference between NHA Development Corporation and the Needham Housing Authority? So I see the check is coming from the NHA Development Corporation.
Yes.
What is
so
that, and what is that source, the source of funds for NHA Development Corporation?
So the NHA Development Corporation enabled us to take out a revolving credit agreement to provide the cash to pay the bills. It's a wholly owned nonprofit organization that is required in deals like this in order for parts of this I brought the deal chart here just in case we got into it, but I'm keeping it brief. This is a normal thing to do. You can't launder all this money through the Needham Housing Authority as a quasi public sector corporation. You've got to set up a separate element, and that was incorporated. And I brought some more show and tell if anybody wants to get into it, where on January 2nd, 2025, and now it's wholly owned, wholly controlled by the Needham Housing Authority Board of Directors, but it's required for this purpose and a number of other purposes as well. But we're not, probably not on the agenda to get into much tonight. We can explain it next month if you'd like.
The funds are segregated, you have a line of credit.
Yes.
Okay,
There you go.
all right, any other questions? All right, let's have a vote.
What are we voting on, Peter, please?
We're voting on
Item
the
7.
item 7,
Disbursement number 7.
disbursement number 7.
And then you'd be interested now.
Take a
Oh,
vote.
for approval of disbursement number 7. Okay, let's have a roll call vote. Rhonda,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes,
John,
Yes.
Rick,
One final question, the amount of,
yes. Pardon me?
76.
the amount of,
76, thank you, Rick. Sorry about that. It's right. It's $76,102.06. Thanks, Rick.
yes, please.
And Avery,
Hi there. I'm so sorry I had to join late. I'm gonna abstain.
abstain. Okay.
Okay, I gotta stay. Keep going.
All right, let's move on to this.
Your vote.
Oh, the chair votes aye. All right, let's go on to disbursement number 8.
This one is in the amount of $67,739.85. It is for BH+A. And looking at the invoice, it does have some of the breakdown I think that the committee is requesting, at least with regards to Linden Street Phase 1A construction documents. It has the total fee and then the percentage complete.
And wow, okay. So that actually does give us the information of where we are.
Okay, so that's on the attachment in your packet. Do we have questions regarding the request and in particular the breakdown beginning on page 2 of the request?
Reg, I just would assume that the two categories we haven't spent money on yet, which would be the final construction documents and bidding, totaling about 450,000, that you're looking to have those paid from this pre-development warrant article, but the remaining amount for construction administration would come from the construction money, which was from the article last May, correct?
Correct. Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's have a motion to approve disbursement request number 8 in the amount of $67,739.85.
I move that we approve it.
second,
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none. Let's have a vote.
Yes.
Rhonda, Denise,
yes,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes,
Avery,
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay, disbursement request number 9.
This one is in the amount of $1,230.50. It is for legal fees regarding the entire request for proposal process to select their developer. I've also attached the status report to the board that of the appropriate time period that references the RFP.
All right, so you see the bills from Klein Hornig, and then the check. And then there is the status reports. You're gonna see these coming up from that are prepared by CHA, their monthly reports. Any questions regarding reimbursement request number 9? All right, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay, second by Denise. Further discussion? Hearing none, let's have a vote. Rhonda,
Yes.
Denise?
Yes,
John,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes,
Avery?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay, now disbursement request number 10.
This one is for the amount of $321 for the same services as the previous one. These are just through the month of July of 2024, whereas the last request was for June of 2024.
Okay, any questions?
I just have one. Why are we paying something from July of 2024? I mean, it shouldn't have been processed long before this. I mean, it's been 9 months now. It's only $300. I understand that. But just, it seems to me that, you know, as we're talking about timeliness, this is a bit behind schedule.
Well, it was just paid. If you look at their check, they just paid it April 23rd.
Okay. I mean, so where's the cash flow issue? It's only $300. I know what.
Let's let that go
Yeah.
for now. But I guess, I don't, if they're paying their bills late, it's kind of, I guess it could be of our concern, but we've talked about that. They've gotten some bills late from Cambridge Housing Authority.
Okay, fine. Let it go.
I'm
Go
happy
ahead.
to address the question
go ahead.
because Rick is actually onto something that you're gonna have a question about, which is we haven't paid our legal bills all the way through the end of the year. So it's not just this $321 bill, but you're going to be seeing more in the future. But again, we get caught up in the cash flow issue. Who do we pay first? And Klein and Hornig were considerate enough to let us defer paying them so that we could pay some of these other bigger ones that with the architects who can stop work if they really want to be unhappy about things. They did not do that either. So it's all intertwined. And of course, Klein Hornig would like to be paid, and you're going to see a lot of catch up additional Klein Hornig for the rest of the year that are going to be much bigger than $321. They weren't particularly doing anything during the RFP period. I mean, when it was out to get bid on, but there's some quite substantial bills going through the end of the year and into this year to actually pick the developer partner and advise on that, and then actually negotiate the LDDA, which we'll get to when we get to what the heck is that, which is a big fat agreement that you just got. You know,
I haven't sent it yet.
You haven't sent it yet.
No,
okay.
I
I
wanted to
brought
confirm
one
with you.
copy here, which I'll do. So the point being that Rick is on the right track. And may I make one more thing that we've changed is we discovered when we were doing this massive reconciliation effort to try to make sure that we hadn't overlooked anything and it tied out to every check that the town issues. If you put all the Klein Hornig invoices and then, you know, on the same reimbursement request, the town, for efficiency, correctly, from their point of view, combines them all, so we get one check with a little sort of detail on the detail that was actually paid, you know, by them. And for us to be able to tie it back to every single
Yeah.
invoice, it required an incredible and analytical effort to unpack
Unbundle it.
all those combined payments. And so we're not asking you not to do that, obviously that makes sense. And that's why we're submitting everything by invoice, because it's much easier to keep track of on a go-forward basis.
Great, thank you. All right,
Move
Uh,
to bid. Did we already pass that?
I think, motion to approve this, I think we've got one pen.
Not for number 10.
Okay, motion to approve number 10,
How much?
in the amount of $321.
Thank you.
Okay, and Denise second, okay. Further discussion, hearing none, Rhonda,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes,
Rick,
Yes,
Avery,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Okay, now we're at disbursement request 11 in the amount of $4,975.50.
This one is for the month of August 31st, 2024. It's Klein Hornig again. It's for services regarding the RFP, but also the section 22 repositioning. And I have attached the status report to the board, and I'm assuming the Housing Authority can probably do a much better job than me at explaining the section 22 repositioning.
So we've discussed this several times with the T-Chalk before, and I think people are starting to get the idea that we are moving to a new federal program from section 9 to section 8. And we needed to obtain legal advice on part of the strategy that we're taking with respect to, as part of the RFP process and evaluating the proposals that we were getting in. So, so we were receiving proposals in mid-August, and that was some question that came up.
Okay. Any further questions regarding this request?
Just have- just as kind of a look ahead to all of this as we're starting to accumulate these. This is where this particular law firm, or any number of law firms that might be working on this project. Again, what would be the budget? And I don't need the answer today, but what is going to be the total amount of legal expenses associated with this project and with this article? And I don't need it today, but I'm just saying, if Reg is talking about a rather large sum of money coming forward to pay these legal bills, then that's when we're going to start to need to see a little bit more definition as to where we are vis-a-vis the total legal expenses on the project. That's all.
I do have one request. If the more information you can put on the cover sheet as to what this is for, the less time it takes for me to review and kind of piece together. I did, piece together what a section 22 is, luckily from the notes that you provided, but it makes it easier for me to draw those connections. So the more information you can provide, the better this will be for
Honestly,
everyone.
it's part of this process improvement.
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
If you could just give us a readout
Yeah.
of what you wish was there but wasn't, that
Yeah.
would have saved you time trying to put the pieces together. That
I
would be
think-
really helpful.
Yeah, if you have the packet, I think just the quick little 3 bullet points where I was like, it's RFP services, repositioning, that's super helpful.
Put it in the direction from us.
Yeah,
If you
I will.
just tell us what to do and we'll do it. But this is, I think, been a useful meeting from that point of view.
Okay,
Process improvement.
all right, Rick, that's a good point, and Celia and Reg, thank you. All right, any further discussion regarding this? I have a motion to approve, let's have a motion to approve request number, disbursement request 11 in the amount of $4,975.50.
I move to approve it.
I second it.
And, okay, further discussion, hearing none. Rhonda,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes,
John,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes,
Avery,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay.
I have to.
Okay, we're still, okay, Rhonda's gonna have to leave. We still have a quorum though,
Mhm.
right? We have Avery. All right, good. Let's go on to, thank you, Rhonda. On to disbursement request number 12. And that is in, the request is in the amount of $1,872.50. Cecilia, do you want to give us brief us on that?
So this is for the same vendor, Klein Hornig, for the month of September 2024 with regards to the section 22 repositioning.
Okay, so it's the same, it's just another bill, same thing with dealing
Yeah.
with section 22 repositioning.
They're monthly bills for essentially the continuation of similar services.
Okay. All right, let's, any discussion or questions?
Just how much is this one for, Peter, please?
This one is for $1,872.50.
Okay, thank you.
So a motion to approve,
So moved.
I'll second that. Discussion. Hearing none, let's have a vote. Denise,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes,
Avery.
Yes. Sorry, kids are here.
That's
sounds
quite
like
all
they're
right.
working.
Chair votes yes. Disbursement request 13 in the amount of $2,942.50.
These are, and the sticky note was because I didn't want to write my question on the copy that eventually gets approved. And so I have the answer now. The LDDA is the Land Disposition Development Designation Agreement, which Reg has provided a copy of me, and I will be forwarding along to the committee after this meeting in advance of the next meeting. But this was found eligible, which is why my sheet came a little late today. So I apologize for that. And that's for the month of October 2024.
Okay, so this is legal work in connection with the LDDDA agreement. Is anyone curious enough to want to know what that agreement is? I'll bite.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I brought a copy, you'll get a soft copy, but this is the master development agreement between us and AHSC Peabody Developer LLC. And it's the thing you sign that spells out all the terms and conditions between the Needham Housing Authority and that entity that's doing the work for us in a huge amount of detail. And it's not only in all the rights and obligations and reporting requirements and but most importantly, I think from from one dimension is it specifies that we are co-developers with them. They're the lead developer, and we receive a 50-50 split of the development fee, which I've been told has never been done before because of the work that we've all done as a town. No other town of our size has ever gotten this far down the path. And the only reason the developer splits half of their development fee is that they joined in early September 2024. And by November 6th, we had a special permit. And usually they join a year or two or three ahead of time. There isn't town CPA funding, there isn't ARPA funding, there isn't other funding that's been brought to bear. So they have to front all that money, and they keep most, if not like 90% of the development fee in the ordinary course of business. So again, it's spelled out, and Peter will love this agreement maybe as an attorney. It's spelled out in great detail, but it's certainly accessible to the committee if they take a look through it here.
Okay, any questions?
And anybody wants this copy can have this copy.
All right, let's have a motion to approve. This is disbursement request 13, the amount of $2,942.50.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a vote. Denise,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye,
Avery,
Aye.
the chair votes aye. Okay, so that completes the disbursement request under Article 17, which was the pre-development funds. The remaining requests, there are 3 of them, are under Article 30. So if you look at your,
Just for the minutes, we're deferring 14 and
so
15.
we'll just, okay, thanks, Rich. I want to say that again. So Articles 14 and 15, there's a question about eligibility, which will be resolved or will be further discussed between council for NHA and council for the town. And will be brought before us in some fashion in a later date. Okay, so Article 30
Yeah.
is I believe that was reimbursement for, we reimburse 50% of
That's-
the
yeah.
cost, and it's generally.
It's the
applicable.
original $150,000 grant that we matched with 150,000 way back when, at the beginning of this whole process.
Preservation and redevelopment of affordable housing.
And so it's broad enough to encompass,
It-
both seabeds and.
It encompasses everything, and we found some unpaid invoices, and there's some more that when we get some cash flow, we'll do. I think the relevant thing is we're close to using up the entire 150,000, right, Celia, on your.
Yes.
Probably, so, and I think we will wind up doing that. And that, I just want to say again, for the record, for the minutes, if anybody cares, that $150,000 is what has now brought us $87 million of redevelopment and modernization of Seabed Cook and Linden Street. That was a good investment on the part of the town and the Newton Housing Authority.
So
Okay, so I have a question on the summary sheet. I have. Are there two disbursement requests 13? Because this one is also
Different thing.
two.
they're two different.
Oh, I
things.
see.
Yeah, it's very, yeah.
Yeah, so this is disbursement request 13, but it's 13 under
Article 30.
Article 30. Okay, got it. All right, and let's see.
So this one, the invoice itself is for $3,857.50, but this agreement was a reimbursable at 50%. So the reimbursement request is for $1,928.66. This is for work done by CHA in January of 2024 under task order number 4, which the CHA project status report, task order number 4 is master planning, design, and pre-development for Linden Chambers Phase 1 through financial construction closing.
Celia, could you just repeat that number you gave us?
The $1,928.75.
75 cents, yeah.
Yep.
All right, any discussion regarding this request for reimbursement? Okay, let's have a motion to approve disbursement 13 under Article 30 in the amount of $1,928.75.
So moved.
I'll second that. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a vote. Denise?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rick? Is that a yes, Rick?
I'm sorry, yes.
Avery?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Next, we'll go on to disbursement request number 14 under Article 30 in the amount of $945. So you want to give us a summary of that?
Yep, this is for November of 2024 with CHA for the same task order number 4 as the previous one.
Discussion? All right, let's have a motion to approve request 14, disbursement 14 under Article 30 in the amount of $945. Denise makes a motion. I'll second that. Further discussion, hearing none. Denise?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Avery?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. All right, our last request is disbursement request number 15 under Article 30 in the amount of $595. And so you want to describe that to us?
Yep, this is essentially the same work, just in December of 2024, so the following month.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Point of information going forward on this. I mean, I'm gonna vote to approve it. I voted the last one, but we just have someone's hours and his rate. We know nothing about what he did, when he did it, anything along those lines. So I'm gonna approve it tonight, but on going forward as part of our process, I think we should get more than just someone's name and their hours and their rate.
Yeah, I think that's getting back to, what's difficult there is that for backup for the rate and that we get their progress report. But if you look at the progress report, it has a lot to do with what they're going to be doing, and some of it has nothing to do with what they're doing, and some of it having to do with what they've done. So it's just, I think that they can elevate their game a little bit so that they can, looks a little bit more like a Klein-Hornig bill rather than a summary of hours and a rate, and kind of a somewhat difficult to discern backup memo.
Yep, but this is from, it's not there.
No,
They need to do that on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, on a going forward basis, if we can
But
do.
one of the challenges is that they do not have the same private sector discipline as a Klein Hornig or any one of our development partners, and unfortunately, that's just what we're dealing with. On the other hand, it's pretty nice that we have $87 million worth of development going forward, so.
Yeah, I know that.
I get it.
We can,
We've had
let's try and get them to elevate their game.
I welcome some help trying to do that, because
Wow.
I have not been able to pull it off.
Maybe you tell them we're not gonna pay their bill unless they do it, Reg. That's probably the best.
So
way.
you're not gonna pay them anyway, so, that's the problem, I welcome some help. I mean, I really genuinely mean that.
Well, what do you suggest we do? Seriously,
I
we.
yeah. Maybe we can talk about that offline.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting to get any help, but if you were willing to help, I'd be great to have that help.
Okay, all right. It sounds like what they have to invest in.
I don't mean this, I'm not trying to defer this, I'm just saying the town has a well-developed management and control process through the PPBC. And if somehow we could get the Cambridge Housing Authority, even if it's already too late for what we've done now, to take that in as constructive input, I think that would be very helpful. But I can't do that myself. I don't know what the process is at the PPBC.
Okay.
But it served the town well.
Okay. All right, let's. All right, let's have a motion to approve this amount.
So moved.
And it's in the amount of $595. It's this person was 15 under Article 3. I'll second that. Further discussion, hearing none. John,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes,
Avery,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, any other business? Okay,
So just to clarify what I will be providing everyone after this meeting, a copy of the LDDA agreement. I will reach out to council on the 3 that he deemed ineligible for a written response as to why, and forward that onto the housing authority so we can discuss in advance of the next meeting. I will forward along everyone an update of the status of all the articles after today's meeting with the ones that we voted to approve. And then I will work with Hank to get a sample of their progress reports from PBBC and work with the housing authority on what that'll look like moving forward for us.
And if I can make a suggestion.
Yes.
I think we need to be a little bit thoughtful about this town council. We're just not asking him to rule again and send us a ruling, right? We're asking for a meaningful, productive meeting with council for the Needham Housing Authority. We're asking for the committee to better understand the elements of that discussion. And I personally am asking for the impact as well, that the decision by both parties we has on the project going forward. So I'd like this to be very meaningful. I don't want this to be a pro forma, send us a letter, what you said before. I think this whole meeting, I want to thank the vice chair for serving as our chair tonight. I think this has not been an easy meeting. I think it is one of the most positive and productive meetings that the TCHOC has engaged in finding our own role, our own responsibility, our expectations, and how we expect to move forward. So, but I would like that discussion with town council to be very substantial and to better understand what's happening.
I will also forward along the finalized schedule, and what I think I'm gonna do for both the committee and the housing authority is add into that schedule or a backup page of that schedule, the dates in which I would need for every meeting, the reimbursement request in my email. So that way I have sufficient time to have this back and forth with council and follow up with the housing authority on any questions we may have in advance to get the committee, the reimbursements with enough time to review prior to the Monday meeting.
And I think another discussion that can take place, very informally though, is your discussion with the Needham Housing Authority. You said they'd like to have help. It seems to me help should come in the form of saying to the entity, this is what we need, period. So do that, we need to be very clear in what we say we need to make a decision. And we forward it to them, and we are, we can take the heat for the Needham Housing Authority on what we're asking for on that issue before a reimbursement is made.
So we're still in a very organic phase, so.
Yes, yeah.
So, and I want to point out, there could be, if there's some additional information that Rick revealed tonight with respect to that lawsuit, maybe town council was unaware of it.
No, we work together. He has the whole file.
Oh, okay, all right.
But
Well, let's put
anyway.
that aside. All right, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But may I build on what Denise said? Just because we're all, I think, on the same team here when it comes to expending legal fees. You start getting town council and our council together, and next thing you know, you're burning $600,000-700,000 an hour. And all of a sudden you have a lot of legal fees. That, they're, I think, maybe trying to work this out a bit at the management level first. And then before we actually turn the meter on, 2 meters on, ultimately that is money that just, you might as well be burning $100 bills to make, common sense decisions on the part of management. So I just would caution everybody about that.
All right, I'll defer to staff on that. I mean, right, that's.
Because, Cecilia is, gonna make the same amount of money no matter how many hours she burns, but,
Sorry, Sally.
Okay, so.
And I'm gonna make the same amount of money, and unfortunately Cheryl is gonna make the same amount of money here, so, just
Well,
be careful how
I
much.
will-
but I don't want, the other thing too is that they have their policies and their procedures on how they resolve these things. So it's obvious that their town council's involved in reviewing.
I'm speaking for the NHA, not for the town.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying, I don't wanna burn any more legal fees than the god awful amount we already have to burn in
Okay.
order to get this
Okay.
thing
We're
done.
looking for clarity. We're
Yeah.
looking for-
Yeah, I will also say, feel free to send them along at reimbursement requests whenever you have them. It doesn't need to wait for a monthly meeting, because then that gives me enough time to process them in advance and everything. I know that's easier said than done, but I'm just saying, don't feel like you need to wait till the monthly meeting. Send them whenever you
We have
feel.
our own internal
Yeah.
process and double checks and triple checks before we send anything out. And unfortunately, it isn't amenable to just sort of sending them out willy-nilly whenever they come up, unfortunately, so.
But I'll give you guys
But give us,
dates.
give us the deadlines.
when I
and
need
we'll
them
try to
by,
hit
yeah.
the deadlines.
Okay, let's have a motion to adjourn. I'll second that. John,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
and Denise,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for your input. Very helpful.
Thank you, folks.
Cecilia?
Hold on. I'm trying to find the stop button.